This week, former Alberta Cabinet Minister Thomas Lukaszuk is under fire after submitting a citizens' initiative petition, only to later claim he doesn't want a referendum at all, a move constitutional lawyers are calling misleading to his signatories. Meanwhile, thousands gathered at the Alberta legislature for a major separatist rally, marking the biggest independence rally in the province's history. Alberta NDP leader Naheed Nenshi is escalating his feud with Premier Danielle Smith, dismissing her pipeline ambitions as a pipe dream, even as the province pushes ahead with plans for West East and West Coast routes. The province is also introducing sweeping public safety legislation to expand policing powers, strengthen Clare's Law, and modernize inmate transfer rules. And as the teachers' strike drags on, unions threaten a general strike that could paralyze the province, vowing to topple the Smith government over her new Back to School Act. All that and more on this week's Alberta Roundup. I'm your host, Isaac Lamoureux, and let's get into that first story right away. Former Progressive Conservative Cabinet Minister Thomas Lukaszuk is being accused of failing to deliver after disavowing a referendum despite successfully exceeding the signature threshold for his Citizens' Initiative petition. Lukaszuk's surprise announcement that he was not seeking to hold a referendum sparked both concerns from constitutional lawyers and praise from the Alberta independence movement. Constitutional lawyer Keith Wilson suggested that Lukaszuk misled the 456,365 signatories of his petition that he presented to Elections Alberta on Tuesday. He said, quote, "Thomas, tell the truth. Your petition calls for a referendum. Here is the legal application you signed. Did you lie to your supporters to get their signatures?" And he, of course, attached a copy of Lukaszuk's petition application that he filed with Elections Alberta. Lukaszuk's petition, received by the Chief Electoral Office on June 5, describes his initiative as a legislative or policy proposal, not a constitutional referendum. Because he filed before the Citizens' Initiative Amendment Act, Bill 54, was proclaimed, he faced a much higher threshold than had he waited, which was 293,976 signatures, or 10% of provincial electors in the post-election day list within 90 days. The wording of the petition clearly asks signatories if they support a referendum. It reads, quote, "Therefore, we as represented by the signatory and applicant below propose a referendum on the following question. Do you agree that Alberta should remain in Canada?" So despite asking signatories to sign in support of a referendum, and surpassing the threshold, Lukaszuk is now saying that he doesn't want a referendum at all. He said, quote, "We knew that the vast majority of Albertans want to remain Canadian, hence we are not asking for a referendum. We already know that we are Canadian and we will always be Canadian. We are asking the Premier to do the right thing and ask Alberta MLAs to vote on this issue and put separatism to bed once and for all." Other Alberta independence figures quickly joined Wilson in challenging Lukaszuk's claims. For example, Alberta Prosperity Project General Counsel Jeffrey Rath said, quote, "Tommy lied to Elections Alberta. He's now saying he never wanted a referendum." And Take Back Alberta leader David Parker said, quote, "I love that the Forever Canadians gave us our referendum. Thanks, guys. You saved us a lot of work." Even Alberta Premier Danielle Smith previously confirmed that Lukaszuk's proposed referendum was a question on separation. In fact, take a quick listen of what she had to say.
Mr. Lukaszuk's vote is a yes-no question. It is a separatist referendum. He may be trying to characterize it differently. But if you ask people if you want to remain in Alberta, yes or no, there are implications if people answer no.
Once a citizen-initiated petition is certified, it must be tabled in the legislature within 15 days of the next sitting, according to Elections Alberta. The government then has 10 sitting days to refer it to a legislative committee. Within 90 days, that committee can recommend that either a bill be introduced or the matter be referred to the Lieutenant Governor in Council for a referendum. If a referendum is recommended, it must occur no later than the next provincial election. If that election is less than a year away, it must happen before the one that follows. But we'll stick with separation and go back to last weekend for our next story, because the Alberta legislature was awash in blue as thousands of Albertans attended the I Am Alberta rally last Saturday afternoon to support Alberta sovereignty and independence. In fact, I'm sure that many of you guys were there and maybe even some of us spoke. Jeffrey Rath, the general counsel for the Alberta Prosperity Project, estimated that over 10,000 people attended, noting that only 15 to 20 counter-protesters were present, and he commended the Alberta sheriffs for their work. But sticking with Lukaszuk's petition, here's what Myrna told me about his petition when we spoke. Take a quick listen of what she had to say.
And speaking of unity on the left, what do you think of Thomas Lukaszuk's pro-Canada movement and his petition going around?
Well, it just astounds me that anyone would be okay with the status quo. I think they should have called it the Forever Screwed petition personally. Like how anyone can be content with the deal that the West has had since the beginning. It's just hard to understand. I think a lot of people signing it are in love with the Canada that existed 50 years ago and aren't aware of where we're at nowadays.
Speakers at the event included Whistle Stop Cafe owner Chris Scott, APP CEO Mitch Sylvester, constitutional lawyers Jeffrey Rath and Keith Wilson, and of course John Bolton was the MC. Common themes among the speakers were freedom, sovereignty, and democracy, and the crowd alternated between cheering for pro-independence and democracy themes and booing when Ottawa's intrusion into the lives of Albertans was mentioned. Constitutional lawyer Keith Wilson warned that if Albertans thought things were bad now, they were only destined to get worse under a federal government pursuing Bill C-9 to censor free speech. He said, quote, "We just want to get Ottawa's knee off our neck." Wilson also pledged a province-wide referendum by 2026. He tasked rally attendees with discussing the benefits of Alberta sovereignty with everyone they know, arguing that the uncertainty of an independent Alberta was less frightening than the certainty of a dystopian federal government in Ottawa. Scott declared the referendum would be the most important action Albertans take in their entire lifetime. And Sylvester used the rally to create a rallying cry for the movement. While Prime Minister Mark Carney campaigned on the Elbows Up movement, Sylvester said that Alberta separatists will use "Come on, let's go," similarly using hockey fights as a baseline. Rath suggested October 25 could be known as the Alberta Independence Day going forward. He claimed that under the Carney government, Canada has become one of the most corrupt countries globally, citing the World Economic Forum's connection to some Liberal Party members. He criticized other Canadian politicians too, explaining that Ontario Premier Doug Ford threatened to cut off American oil without realizing that oil reaching Ontario must first pass through the United States. He also criticized former Environment Minister Stephen Guilbeault for not knowing that Canada did not have a cross-country pipeline. Rath also celebrated his and his team's recent trip to the United States, claiming that US President Donald Trump's administration showed ample support for Alberta becoming an independent country. Rath stated that 70 to 75% of the Alberta UCP's board supports independence and urged rally attendees to attend the upcoming AGM to increase that support to 100%. I spoke with Rath after the event and he said, quote, "Today was a massive day for the Alberta Freedom Movement. The biggest independence rally in Alberta's history was held on the steps of the legislature today. Hopefully it sends a really strong message to both Danielle Smith and Mark Carney that we don't give a about what they're doing anymore. We're out, we're done." And our next story is actually an exclusive thanks to the fact that I've been spending Monday to Thursday at the Alberta legislature for this session. And last Thursday, I was able to question Alberta NDP leader Naheed Nenshi at a press conference there. Nenshi slammed Premier Danielle Smith's proposed West Coast pipeline, dismissing it as a, quote, pipe dream, and accusing the government of squandering taxpayer dollars on a project that he claims doesn't exist. Nenshi told True North that his party has a proven record on pipeline construction while the UCP does not. He said, quote, "There's precisely one government that has gotten a pipeline to Tidewater built. It was not a Conservative government. It was, in fact, Rachel Notley and the New Democrats who got it built with, if I might say, an able assist from the then mayor of Calgary." Smith recently pressed for new pipelines to reach global markets at a committee meeting, pledging to double her province's oil production if Ottawa clears regulatory barriers. She cited regulatory burden and uncertainty resulting in the cancellation or delay of the Northern Gateway, Keystone XL, and Energy East pipelines. She highlighted that those projects would have generated an additional 2.5 million barrels a day in production, equating to $55 billion worth of GDP, 40% of which the governments would take, split almost equally, between the federal and provincial governments, meaning between $10 to $15 billion of additional tax revenue annually. Smith's government outlined its plan to partner with First Nations and industry to build new pipelines to Canada's west coast and southeastern Ontario in last week's throne speech. The Alberta Premier has been at odds with BC Premier David Eby on the possibility of a West Coast pipeline. Smith called Eby un-Canadian and unconstitutional for his stance, and Eby has repeatedly attacked Smith in response, criticizing the pipeline while, like Nenshi, simultaneously arguing that it doesn't exist. And of course, as I said there, Nenshi echoed similar talking points. He said, quote, "What the Premier is doing is not a pipeline, it's a pipe dream." He continued by saying, quote, How can it be on the major projects list when there's no projects? There's no investor, there's no proponent, there's no consultation, there's no consent, there's not even a route. This is not how you get a pipeline built. There is a much better way for us to be able to move forward to ensure that we have the energy exports that we need to supply the world with safe, clean, reliable energy. So as I've discussed before on the show, Alberta has pledged $14 million for early planning, which includes route assessment, engineering, cost estimates, and Indigenous engagement. The province hopes the Federal Major Projects Office will approve the pipeline and that it will be part of the second wave of major projects announced by the Grey Cup in November. Smith previously said, quote, "There is no universe where Alberta will tolerate being landlocked in our own country by our neighboring province, especially when the same industry he continues to demonize has generated so much wealth for his province and the country." Smith has also warned the federal government that if it does not approve a West Coast pipeline, she will turn south, arguing that the United States has shown interest in pipelines. She said, quote, "If we can't build cross-border infrastructure and we can't get our products to market, then we're violating what it is that the founders came together to build Canada in the first place. Let's go back to the idea of what Canada is supposed to be. Let's get these kind of projects built. Let's find new markets. Let's work together on that." But for our next story, we're going to swap gears a bit because we'll talk about a bill that was introduced on Thursday. And to start that off, I'll show a quick clip of me in the legislature.
Yeah, guys, so I'm here at the Alberta legislature. Just got out of the press conference for Bill 4, which we'll shortly run a clip for. But yeah, just to let you guys know, I'll be in the legislature every week, Monday to Thursday, covering the happenings in the chamber. So definitely expect a lot more articles and reporting on that. Live from the legislature here, Isaac Lamoureux, True North.
So Alberta's government has introduced sweeping new legislation to expand provincial policing powers, enhance protections for victims of domestic violence, and modernize inmate transfer rules under new public safety legislation. Public Safety and Emergency Services Minister Mike Ellis tabled Bill 4, the Public Safety and Emergency Services Statute Amendment Act 2025 No. 2 on Thursday. He said, quote, "This legislation strengthens the laws that keep Albertans safe. It builds a strong foundation for the new Alberta Sheriff's Police Service, ensures people at risk of domestic violence can quickly get the information they need to protect themselves, and modernizes how our correctional system operates." The bill formalizes the transition toward a made-in-Alberta policing model by expanding the powers of Alberta sheriffs and creating a framework for joint operations with municipal and federal agencies. The Alberta Sheriff's Police Service will function as an independent provincial police service designed to complement existing law enforcement agencies, including the RCMP, First Nations Police Services, and municipal forces, but it is intended to give municipalities another option for their policing needs. The RCMP will continue to serve as Alberta's primary provincial police force while the ASPS develops operational capacity. As for the RCMP, though, take a quick listen to what Ellis had to say in response to me at a press conference about their continued policing efforts.
We do have time for one more question here from the floor. Isaac, I see you had your hand up. You can go ahead.
Yeah, hi, Mr. Isaac Lamoureux, True North. In the documents you set out today, I only saw one mention of the RCMP and its continued policing efforts in the province. So I'm curious, has the RCMP or Ottawa fulfilled their promise of officer additions in Alberta?
Well, look, I just got back from a federal provincial territorial meeting, and I'll just say this. Manitoba, they had indicated that their authorized strength level is short by 30%. Saskatchewan had indicated they're short by 25%. In our jurisdiction, we hover anywhere from 16 to 20% shortage, and other provinces that all have that same issue. So, as I said to the minister in Manitoba, like, this is the same number that you gave us last year. So the question was, you haven't seen any marked improvements when it comes to authorized strength levels. So, I can't wait for the RCMP to figure out how they're going to recruit, how they're going to train, how they are going to fulfill the authorized strength gaps that they have all throughout Canada. My concern, as I've stated many, many times before, when somebody calls 911, my expectation is somebody show up to that call.
Did you have a follow-up, Isaac?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if there's been any discussions with Ottawa about what a transition process away from the RCMP might look like.
Yeah, I think the Minister obviously there's varying opinions on this, and Minister Angrisari had indicated to all the provinces that he is open to any and all discussions.
The legislation also enhances the Disclosure to Protect Against Domestic Violence Act, or CLARES law, by giving the Integrated Threat and Risk Assessment Center clear legal authority to access and disclose police information during threat assessments. CLARES law allows Albertans at risk of domestic violence to request or be proactively given information from police about a partner's history of violence, stalking, or harassment, helping them make informed choices about their safety. The Alberta government said the amendments to CLARES law would reduce red tape, minimize delays, and make sharing information easier between police and citizens. The bill also amends the Corrections Act to give Alberta clear authority to negotiate inmate transfers with other provinces and territories. The changes are intended to improve coordination and allow transfers during emergencies like wildfires or when offenders have legal matters in other jurisdictions. According to the province, the reforms align Alberta's correctional system with practices across Canada and are part of the government's broader commitment to strengthen public safety through practical and efficient reforms. But for our last story today, we'll quickly cover unions threatening a general strike. Alberta's top labor leaders are threatening a province-wide general strike and recall campaigns following the passage of the Back to School Act, which ended the province's teachers' strike. The legislation forced teachers back to work and invoked the notwithstanding clause to prevent further legal challenges. Gil McGowan, the president of the Alberta Federation of Labour, said Premier Smith had awakened a sleeping giant. He said, quote, "Danielle Smith has awakened a sleeping giant when she took the unprecedented step of using the notwithstanding clause. She has galvanized unions in this province and across the country like never before." He said the AFL and its affiliates now share a common purpose. He said, quote, "The purpose is to topple this government. If they won't shrink the size of our classrooms, we will shrink the size of their caucus." The Federation has launched a campaign called Ready to Resist, claiming nearly 30,000 signups in the first week. The initiative will poll its members on their willingness to participate in a province-wide coordinated job action. He said the process has begun for a potential general strike. He accused Smith's government of advancing a MAGA-style agenda and said the province's unions would throw sand in the gears of this government. McGowan also announced plans to mobilize around recall campaigns against UCP MLAs and new citizen initiative petitions targeting independent school funding. He said, quote, "We're going to use the tools that she created against her," referencing Alberta's citizen initiative and recall legislation. According to Elections Alberta, inducements for recall campaigns are not permitted. True North previously highlighted critics' warnings that the petition to strip funding from accredited independent schools would dismantle Alberta's long-standing school choice model, forcing 55,000 students out of specialized programs and back into overcrowded public classrooms. McGowan, during his press conference, also lied about Alberta's school funding model. He claimed the provincial government was, quote, "starving public schools while shoveling public money at private schools," but of course that is in no way, shape, or form how it works. The province's system, which McGowan should know because it's been in place in some form since the 1970s, allows up to 70% of per-student operational funding to follow children to independent schools. Therefore, if students attending independent schools were forced back to public schools, it would actually cost taxpayers an additional approximate $300 million. And any discrepancy between public school and independent school funding is due to differences in enrollment growth. Smith's government, of course, invoked the Notwithstanding Clause, Section 33, while implementing its back-to-work legislation to force teachers back to school on Wednesday after 740,000 students were away from class for almost a month. And speaking of the Notwithstanding Clause, former Premier Jason Kenney previously defended it as an essential part of Canada's constitutional compromise, telling True North in September that any attempt to restrict it would be strange and dangerous. He said, quote, "The provinces only signed on to the repatriation of the Constitution, including the Charter of Rights back in 1982, because they included the Section 33 Notwithstanding Clause. Carney has no democratic mandate to pursue it, and I think it's going to be very divisive in the Federation." McGowan vowed that every union in the coalition would now work towards toppling the government. He said his unions won't behave like the Freedom Convoy, which he called MAGA-inspired and MAGA-funded. He also called Smith a bully and said she, quote, "is the one who should be afraid." McGowan also alleged that Smith was buying off her own caucus. But that wraps up this week's Alberta Roundup. My name's Isaac Lamoureux. Have a great weekend. Thank you, and God bless.